Hello, welcome back. It's great to see you again. I've got a lot of great information to share with you in this session about how careful money management is a must if you want to hold on to your well-deserved sports wagering winnings. As we've talked about so many times before, wagering on sports can be exciting and rewarding, but at times it can also be stressful. Stressful, you might ask? Why is that? It's because sports betting involves uncertainty, and it's the uncertainty associated with sports betting and the outcome of your wagers that can make betting on sports both exhilarating and often nail-biting at the same time. That's why understanding the psychology associated with winning and losing streaks and having the proper money management plan in place to get you through the emotional highs and lows are, in my opinion, the most underappreciated aspects of sports wagering. Careful money management is about balancing the need to maximize the number of winning bets while at the same time limiting the loss of your precious sports betting capital. That's why I'm going to introduce you to a simple and sensible money management game plan that will help you lock down your profits while reducing your risk of loss. And most importantly, stay in the game even after you've taken a few hits and sustained some losses. That's because it's essential that you remain in control of your emotions. That way you can focus on your game analysis no matter whether you are feeling that big time high that comes when you're on a winning streak and thinking that nothing can go wrong, or facing that terrible beaten down feeling that comes with the inevitable losing streak. Look, I can tell you from experience that proper money management does not involve sophisticated accounting systems or complicated progressive wagering schemes. It's simply the disciplined application of a few basic fundamentals about when and how much to wager. First off, you'll need to limit your bet size. Every professional knows that the first rule of making money is not to lose it. Since it's impossible to win all of your sports bets, careful money management begins with never placing more of your capital at risk than you can afford to lose. That's why limiting your bet sizes is so important, because it protects you against the risk of having a single betting loss wipe you out. Next, you need to segregate your sports betting capital. While it may seem obvious, you need to separate your sports betting capital from your personal money before you start the entire sports wagering process. If you plan to bet seriously, your sports betting capital has to be money that is not needed for everyday expenses. In simple terms, that means do not bet the mortgage money, the rent money, or the grocery money. Remember, your sports betting capital has to be money that you can tie up for a long period of time and that you don't mind losing. If you need it for some critical short-term expenditure, then I'm telling you, don't bet with that money. Then remember to be selective. As we discussed in Module 3, you should approach sports betting like Ted Williams did when he stepped into the batter's box. Swing only at those pitches that are in your hitting zone. Selectivity is key, and it means placing wagers only when you have an edge with the appropriate margin of safety, and passing on the games where you have no advantage. At the heart of my money management game plan is the 5% rule, which says there is one and only one bet size that's appropriate for each wager that you make. And it's an absolute fixed dollar amount. It's calculated at the beginning of each season, and it stays fixed at that level for the entire season. That amount is 5% of your beginning sports wagering capital. That means if you begin the season with $1,000 of sports wagering capital, then the appropriate size for each wager is $50. No more, no less. If you begin the season with $5,000, the appropriate wager size is $250 per bet. And if you start with $10,000, it's $500 per bet. Maintaining a fixed bet size that's equal to 5% of your beginning sports betting capital can produce great returns while prudently diversifying your bets, and all with an acceptable level of risk. This is where most sports bettors fail. That's because the biggest single mistake most average sports bettors make is constantly changing their bet sizes. That's because constantly changing the size of your bet is a strategy that's guaranteed to cost you money. It doesn't matter whether the different bet sizes are a result of an anxiety-induced need to dig yourself out of a losing hole, a positive reaction to an extended winning streak, or part of a progressive betting scheme. Don't do it. Just don't do it. It's the opposite of the well-known Nike slogan. That's because to be successful in the long run, you must have the discipline to follow the 5% rule and bet an absolute fixed amount on each and every wager. Wagering a consistent 5% of your beginning capital properly diversifies your wagers, maximizes your returns, and limits the amount you can lose on any one wager. A fixed dollar bet size of 5% is large enough to produce a high return on your investment, but it's not so high that it knocks you out of the game when you suffer a loss or two. When you think about the 5% rule, think of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. 5% is not too high and not too low, but just right. Here's something that not many people know about sports betting, and that's that poor money management generates more losses for players than bad game analysis. That's because even the worst bettors hardly ever lose more than 60% of their bets over time. But they often lose all or most of their money. How can that be? How does that happen? Investors would say it's because they have a bad capital allocation plan, which simply means they mismanage their money. And the four most common money management errors people make when wagering on sports all involve changing their bet sizes. The first is that they raise their bet amounts, especially when they are on a winning streak. The second is the opposite of the first, and that involves lowering their bet amounts, which often happens as a reaction to a losing streak. And number three is that they risk it all in hopes of hitting on the big one, which is often caused by betting on a hot tip or a so-called sure thing. And the fourth involves chasing losses, meaning doubling down in hopes of making up for a series of losses with just one big winning bet. Doubling down is a sure way to have a money management disaster. How do you avoid making these four common mistakes? It's simple, and I'm going to say it again. No matter how great the temptation, don't change your bet size. Keep it at a standard 5%. Also, you don't want to put too much emphasis on your short-term results, no matter whether the results are good or bad. It's unfortunate that many sports bettors make the mistake of evaluating their results over too short a period of time. They believe having a 65% win rate means winning 6 or 7 out of every 10 bets in perfect sequence over and over again. Probability theory tells us this is not likely to happen, and even if it does, you can't bank on it continuing. That's because the statistical principles of variance and standard deviation say that even with a 65% win rate, you are almost as likely to go 8-12 one week as you are to go 18-2 the next. The good news is that an 8-12 record one week combined with an 18-2 record the following week equals 26-14, which is, guess what? Your expected win rate of 65%. This explains why you need to make enough bets to let your winning edge show through. Here's one of my favorite examples because it shows why getting enough betting opportunities is so important. It involves a free throw contest between two imaginary basketball players, Sammy Swish and Arnold Airball. Sammy, the more skilled of the two players, makes 65% of his free throw attempts, while Arnold makes only 35% of his. They both enter a free throw shooting contest where two shooters are pitted against each other, with only the winner of each pairing advancing to the next round. Sammy and Arnold play each other in the first round. When reviewing the contest rules, Arnold and Sammy discover that each round involves only 5 shots, with the player making the most shots out of 5 moving on to the next round. Arnold, the poorer shooter, is ecstatic with the 5-shot competition, but Sammy is really disappointed because he was hoping that each round would involve at least 100 shots. Why would the better player want more shots? As any good basketball player knows, you have to keep shooting even when you are missing because skill will eventually kick in and the shots will start to fall. Since we know that Sammy is a 65% shooter and that Arnold makes 35% of his shots, we can use some sophisticated probability techniques to model the expected outcome of their matchup. But we don't need advanced statistics to tell us that the most likely outcome, of course, is that Sammy should make 3 shots, which is 65% of his 5 shots, and Arnold should make 2 shots, which is 35% of his 5 shots. This means that Sammy is expected to win, but by only a small 1-shot margin. But here's where the advanced math comes in, and these results are what makes Sammy really nervous. 3 makes by Sammy and 2 by Arnold are only the most likely number of shots that each of them is expected to make. And that's among a wide array of other likely and not so likely results. In fact, Sammy is only somewhat more likely to make 3 shots out of 5 than he is to make 2 out of 5. To make matters worse for Sammy, Arnold is only a bit less likely to make 3 out of 5 than he is to make 2 out of 5. As you can see, even with a small 1-shot change in the likely outcomes, we could have Arnold Airball making 3 shots and Sammy Swish making just 2, which would cause Sammy, the better player, to go home the loser. Why is that? The problem is that 5 free throws represent too few opportunities from which to draw any meaningful conclusions. We need a larger number in order to determine which player is better. That's why the superior player or team always wants more chances to prove their skill. It also explains why teams that are underdogs slow down the tempo of a game to improve their odds of winning. In basketball, the underdogs run the clock down in an attempt to reduce their opponent's possessions. In football, lesser skilled teams often run the ball a lot, so that as the game clock winds down, it limits the number of offensive plays that the better team has available to score points. The fact that a lot of shots in basketball or plays in football are required before reaching a valid conclusion is what statisticians call the rule of large numbers. This rule says that when it comes to statistical certainty, the greater the number of observations, the more accurate the overall result. The rule of large numbers explains why Billy Beane's Oakland Athletics have not won the World Series, even though they place high in the baseball standings almost every year, and why the ultimate World Series winner or Super Bowl champion cannot be predicted with absolute certainty. It's also why, when betting on sports, you must have a margin of safety embedded in your wagers, as we discussed in our last module. Returning to our imaginary free throw contest for a moment, Sammy Swish, who is confident in his skill, understands the rule of large numbers and knows that it works to his advantage. The more Sammy shoots, the more he will score. The legendary coach Bill Parcells liked to say, "You are what you are." But Coach Parcells only has it partially right. What he should say is, "You are what you are if you have enough opportunities to prove it." Yogi Berra said it better when he remarked, "There ain't no lying over a 162-game season." And that's because playing 162 games provides enough opportunities to prove which players and teams are the best. The lesson here for you is that the rule of large numbers says that you have to make enough bets to demonstrate your sports wagering skill. Said another way, you have to get up enough shots, which means playing the betting game frequently in order to win the betting game. But with sports betting, there's an additional consideration. The bets you make must be selectively chosen and of the highest quality. The failure to understand the rule of large numbers is the undoing of many sports bettors and investors. Unfortunately, many bettors and investors don't or can't keep their eye on the long run. They become obsessed with the results of a particular game or a certain stock trade and react badly. To achieve success, sports wagering, just like investing, must be viewed as an exercise in allocating capital over a long sequence of bets, instead of a one-time chance to win a lottery jackpot. To illustrate this point, Table 6.1 shows the range of wins and losses you can expect at various wagering levels, assuming a 65% win rate. As you would expect, now that you know the rule of large numbers, Table 6.1 reports that as the number of wagers increases, the range between the lowest and highest number of expected wins narrows, making it more likely that a sports bettor with a winning edge, in this instance, a 65% win rate, will come out as a long-term winner. For example, assuming a 65% win rate and 50 wagers, Table 6.1 shows that a sports bettor would obviously anticipate winning 65% of his 50 wagers, which is 32 or 33 wagers. But what's not so obvious is that it's also just as likely for the number of wins to be in a range that's as low as 25, which is a 51% win rate, and as high as 40, which is an 80% win rate. After 500 wagers, the anticipated number of wins would be 65% of 500 wagers, which is 325 winning bets. But the number of wins could also fall anywhere within a range that begins as low as 300 wins, which is a 60% win rate, and reaches as high as 350 wins, which is a 70% win rate. And that's with an equal amount of certainty. And here's where it gets even better, and that's because at 1,000 bets, the chances for success for the skilled bettor increase even more, with a 62% win rate forming the lower boundary of the expected win range. And as we know from scorecards in Module 2, a 62% win rate can produce some very profitable results. The good news in all of this is that the more bets you make, the greater the likelihood that your sports wagering skill shows through when you have a winning edge. Now let's talk about winning and losing streaks. To begin with, what you need to know is that winning and losing streaks are another mathematical certainty associated with sports betting. They are guaranteed. Yes, that's right. Winning and losing streaks are a normal occurrence, and there's no way to avoid them. But since you now know that winning and losing streaks are coming your way, it makes them easier to deal with. Or, as the great baseball player Yogi Berra once said, "I don't blame myself when I'm not hitting. I just blame the bat, and if it keeps up, I get a new bat." To get a better understanding of winning and losing streaks, let's return to our basketball players, Sammy Swish and Arnold Airball. Sammy is a 65% free throw shooter. Table 6.2 tells us that he has a 42% chance of making 2 shots in a row, a 27% chance of making 3 shots in a row, an 18% chance of making 4 shots in a row, and a 12% chance of making all 5 shots. Table 6.2 also shows that on the flip side, Sammy has a 12% chance of missing 2 shots in a row, a 4% chance of missing 3 shots in a row, a 2% chance of missing 4 shots in a row, and just a 1% chance of missing all 5 shots. Arnold, on the other hand, is only a 35% shooter. So Table 6.3 tells us that he has just a 12% chance of making 2 shots in a row, a 4% chance of making 3 shots in a row, a 2% chance of making 4 shots in a row, and just a 1% chance of making all 5 shots. Now, looking at the other side of the coin for Arnold, Table 6.3 also shows us that he has a 42% chance of missing 2 shots in a row, a 27% chance of missing 3 shots in a row, an 18% chance of missing 4 shots in a row, and a 12% chance of missing all 5 shots. Because Sammy's chances of making 5 in a row are 12%, he should make 5 shots in a row about every 8 sequences, or about every 40 shots. On the other hand, Arnold's chances of making 5 in a row are only 1%. So Arnold is only going to hit 5 straight every 100 sequences, or about every 500 shots. Now let's step back for a minute from all this detail and minutia that's in these tables and focus on the important takeaway. And that's, as these tables demonstrate, winning and losing streaks occur for both the skilled and unskilled player. But winning streaks occur far more often for the better player, which is a good thing because it rewards skill. And the corollary is that losing streaks occur far more often for the unskilled player, which is just too bad for them. And the great thing is that this all holds true in sports betting too. which means the greater your betting edge, the higher your win rate will be, and the more winning streaks you will have. Unfortunately, there's also a bit of bad news in these tables. Even for skilled players, there will be losing streaks. And it's how you react to the adversity caused by losing streaks that will ultimately determine your sports betting success. Or, as Kevin Costner says in the movie Bull Durham,
do you know what the difference between hitting 250 and 300 is? It's just 25 hits. 25 hits in 500 at-bats is 50 points, okay? There's 6 months in a season, that's about 25 weeks. That means if you get just one extra flare a week, just one, a gorp, you get a ground ball with eyes, you get a dying quail, just one more dying quail a week, and you're in Yankee Stadium.
That's right, in baseball, one extra hit is the difference between batting 250 and 300 for the entire season. If you can do the same as a sports bettor and improve your win rate by even just a little bit, you'll go on more winning runs, and as you saw in the scorecards in Module 2, your profits will skyrocket too. If the arithmetic favors the skilled sports bettor, why is it that so few are successful at staying in the sports betting game? The reason is primarily because losses hurt so much that the average bettor isn't psychologically prepared to work his or her way through them. Now here's some really interesting stuff about losing and how it can affect you. To study the psychological effect that losses have, the noted economist Paul Samuelson created an experiment in which he offered to pay his friends $200 if they correctly called heads or tails based on the result of a fair coin toss. But on the other hand, they would pay him only $100 for each incorrect call that they made. This means that if they called heads or tails correctly, they would receive $200 from Samuelson. But if they had an incorrect call, they would only have to pay him $100. Obviously, with a 50-50 chance of getting it right on a coin flip, the odds are with you when you can win $200 by putting only $100 at risk. But guess what? Most people didn't accept Samuelson's offer, even though the odds were in their favor and they had a 50-50 chance of coming away with 2 times their money. The most common response was, "I won't do it because I would feel the pain of the $100 loss more than the joy of the $200 gain. But I'll take you up on it if you promise to flip the coin 100 times." What does this tell us about human behavior? It tells us that most people are averse to losses because losses make us feel bad. In fact, when given a choice between 2 uncertain outcomes, psychologists have found that people are about 2.5 times more averse to a loss than they are happy about a comparable gain, meaning that they regret losses about 2.5 times as much as they enjoy a gain of similar size. Focusing on each single coin toss has yet another bad side effect. Placing too much emphasis on each flip causes people to become very short-term oriented. And as a result, they tend to think more about their losses than they do about their wins, which causes them to become even more risk averse. This explains why Samuelson found that the less frequently his friends evaluated their results, the more likely they were to intuitively see the gains when the odds were with them. That's why they wholeheartedly agreed to play Samuelson's game when given the opportunity to toss the coin repeatedly, because they could intuitively see that over the long run, the expected payoff was very much in their favor. In his book, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, brain researcher Robert Sapolsky makes the important point that our human bodies are sophisticated mechanisms that have evolved over thousands of years, and that our heritage can be traced back to the savannas of Africa, where along with many other types of animals, we honed our survival skills. Sapolsky asks us to think about a zebra grazing peacefully on the plain, but suddenly the zebra is attacked by a lion. The zebra now has 2 choices: either try to defend himself against the lion's claws, which is most likely a losing proposition, or run like crazy, hoping that he can escape. Given this choice of fight or flight, the zebra will always choose flight, and so his muscles are immediately flooded with energy so he can run away from the hungry lion as fast as possible. For modern human beings, Sapolsky makes the point, that it doesn't work this way. When faced with adversity, most of us tend to just sit around and worry. But in doing so, Sapolsky says we turn on the same physiological responses that would occur if we were attacked by the hungry lion, which means our bodies flood with chemicals to help us run. But we don't run. We don't use up those chemical resources. And at this point, what happens instead, he says, is that our reactions become short-sighted, inefficient, penny-wise, and dollar-foolish. This type of stress-induced short-term thinking is common in sports wagering and can result in disaster for the average sports bettor. But remember, in Module 2, you took an oath not to be average. Instead, winning sports bettors like you recognize when stress is creeping into their wagering activities. They control it by maintaining their discipline and focus on executing the get in and win process and move on from evaluating short-term results. They have accepted that losing is an inherent part of winning and have come to grips with that anxious feeling associated with losing because they trust that their process will yield successful long-term results. That's right. In the face of adversity and the stress that accompanies it, winning sports bettors have the emotional discipline required to fall back on the foundational get in and win principles. They keep their bet sizes at a fixed dollar amount that's equal to 5% of their sports betting capital. They stay selective and they bet only on those games where there is a sufficient margin of safety. Having said all that, I know that every prudent money management program must have a contingency plan for extreme situations that provides a safety valve should things go really badly. That means you need to have a backup plan should you get really unlucky and suffer some severe losses. Well, the 5% rule is at the core of your money management game plan. There is one exception to this hard and fast rule of not changing your bet size. This occurs if, and only if, you ever reach the point where your sports betting capital is less than half the amount you began the season with. I am sure you remember from the previous module that black swan events do occur. And if you are unlucky and the black swan curses you, extreme conditions demand extreme remedies. But guess what? When the black swan hits, that doesn't mean that the remedy is to double down. In fact, it means just the opposite. It means you cut your bet sizes in half. Yes, in half. For example, if you started the season with $5,000 of sports betting capital and it falls below $2,500, then you should cut your fixed bet size in half. Normally, with $5,000 of beginning capital, your fixed bet size using the 5% rule would be $250, which is 5% of $5,000. But should your sports betting capital fall below $2,500 at any point during the season, which is half the amount you started with, then reduce your bet size to $125. You should continue to wager at the reduced $125 level until your sports betting capital goes back above the emergency threshold of $2,500, at which point you should return to making $250 wagers. But remember, it's important that this temporary reduction in bet size is only implemented in an emergency or black swan or real outlier situation as a method to protect your precious sports wagering capital. Once you get back on the winning track, return your wagers to the standard 5% bet size. Proper money management will not make you a winner, but it will enable you to hold on to what you've won. That's because winning is a result of accurate game analysis and finding value. While on the other hand, effective money management is about properly balancing risk and return in a way that maximizes profits and minimizes losses. But you must be able to do both, accurately identify value and practice careful money management to make money and hold on to it when betting on sports. To come out ahead in the long run, you need to keep these 4 key money management concepts in mind. Keep your wagers to a reasonable and consistent amount of 5%. Number 2, make sure you place enough high-quality bets to prove your skill. Number 3, recognize that losses are an inevitable part of winning and have trust in the get in and win process when things go against you. Number 4, be selective and bet only when you have a significant margin of safety. And above all, remember that it's over time, not overnight, that you'll earn real sports betting profits. That brings us to the end of this module. The next time we meet, I'm going to show you how to decode the sportsbook's betting lines and how to put together a business plan for your sports betting enterprise. I'll explain how to prepare your own sports wagering cash flow plan so you'll know when and how much to pay yourself. It's in this next module where you'll see how sports betting can really get your cash flow rolling. That's it for now. Until I see you again, have fun, good luck, and may the odds be with you.